Building wealth in real estate? Let the Exeter Group take the mystery out of how it's done on Go Ahead Ask.
Welcome to the Go Ahead Ask podcast by the Exeter Group, where we unravel the mysteries of real estate. Our goal is to provide investors with a better quality education so that you can make better informed investment decisions. We have planned topics coming up that will cover exit strategies for highly appreciated real estate, net lease properties and the benefits of net lease properties, 2 to 4 unit rental properties. So we'll focus just on the 2 to 4 unit market, qualified opportunity zone investments, Delaware statutory trusts, real estate tax issues with a tax advisor. We're going to focus on one podcast just on seller carryback notes. So a lot of exciting topics coming up. The one thing we do want to ask, which is why we call this Go Ahead Ask podcast, is email your questions. We always want to be able to respond to your questions. So email the questions to us. Email address is ask@exeterco.com. So it's ask@exeterco.com. My name is Bill Exeter. I'm one of your co-hosts for today.
I'm Lauren Speidel, and we're hosts for Go Ahead Ask.
Today's topic for our podcast has changed. So the last podcast we did, we had Unraveling the Mystery of 1031 Exchanges Part 1. And today was going to be the same, Unraveling the Mysteries of 1031 Exchanges Part 2. But we had a very important topic come up that's critically important to everyone. It should be near and dear to everyone's heart. And that is that 1031 exchanges are once again being threatened. This happens, every 4 to 5 years. It'll be either Congress or the Senate or the executive branch, administration, what have you, will decide to make a change or to eliminate 1031 exchanges. And it always sounds good, and they always make it sound easy. All we have to do is eliminate 1031 exchanges and think of all the tax revenue we'll collect. But it's not that easy. Actually, it's a disaster waiting to happen. It'll absolutely have devastating consequences for the real estate industry and actually the entire economy. So anyways, here we go again. Presidential candidate Joe Biden has announced that he intends to eliminate Section 1031 exchanges for the high-income individual, high-income investor, should he become president, which is just a bad thing.
And 1031 exchanges have been around for 100 years. Actually, next year will be the 100-year anniversary of exchanges. Before it actually became a code within the IRS, you would see farmers barter for livestock, they'd barter for land. And it was put in place in 1921 to really fuel the economy. For those who are not familiar with a 1031 exchange, it is a code within the IRS that allows you to take property that you've held for investment purposes, sell that asset, defer the tax liability associated with that sale, and have your full net sales price working for you in another asset or multiple assets. And it can be used for many reasons. For someone who is building their portfolio, it's a great way to sell an asset and maybe diversify into multiple assets. Or maybe you're looking to change the location of your assets. So you can sell, defer that tax liability, and choose assets located in one of the 50 states. It's a great tax deferral benefit. Eventually, when you pass away, your beneficiaries receive a step up in cost basis, which means that your tax liability goes with you when you pass, and those beneficiaries are starting fresh. So it really can be a wonderful estate planning tool, and it can really help build your portfolio. Today, we have my dear friend, Dan Wagner, with us today. He is Senior Vice President of Government Relations for the Inland Real Estate Group of Companies. He's also past president of the Chicago Association of Realtors. He was named in 2017 as the Chicago Realtor of the Year. And last year, Dan was inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Illinois Realtors and the National Association of Realtors. So Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's great to be here with two of my favorite people in the whole world, Bill Exeter and Speidel. You guys are the best. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on. And this is a on topic, but it's a little kind of a curveball question. We're talking about how candidate Biden wants to eliminate 1031 exchanges. And I thought it was really, really odd that he would come out and announce this before getting elected. What are your thoughts on that? Wouldn't you think he'd wait, and if he got elected as president, then come out and say, here's my plan, instead of coming out and saying, I'm going to destroy the economy?
Bill, that's a great question, and I've been researching that quite a bit. One of the things that was interesting is that it's believed that he really put this together before COVID. The reason why we know that is because the Brookings Institute got the report in February. And so they kind of did the analysis. So obviously they weren't, the campaign was not thinking about what, the impact of COVID is. Obviously the 1031 exchange should always be in the tax code because it's so important. It has been for, like Lauren said, almost 100 years. But the idea that this real estate economy that's right now backfiring, the idea that we're going to also now eliminate the 1031, it would absolutely seize up the engine and things would just stop. It would just be horrific if that were to happen. It probably is not a coincidence that the President Trump is in commercial real estate, and this targets commercial real estate. So that's my perception. I could be wrong, but I think it's obviously a political issue. And the other aspect of this, besides getting rid of the 1031, he also wants to get rid of the stepped up in basis. It's a pretty big deal, and he would also increase the current capital gains tax as well. So it's quite a big package of really targeting commercial real estate, and would be devastating.
And for the listeners who don't really know what the step up in cost basis is, just a quick example. Let's say years ago you bought something for $100,000. Today it's worth $1 million. And then you pass on. Your heirs can inherit that property, and their cost basis would be stepped up or increased to the fair market value at the date of your death, which is $1 million. So their cost basis is increased from 100,000 to $1 million. They could sell the property the next day and pay zero taxes. That's why the 1031 allows you to exchange throughout your lifetime, pass on the property to your heirs, and all the taxes effectively go away. So it's a huge benefit. The fact that he's trying to eliminate both the 1031 exchange and the step up is just stunning.
It would have major impact on our commercial real estate world for sure. And one of the things that people who want to attack the 1031, they highlight that the idea that you can swap until you drop. Actually, there's been two really good studies. One, the Ling and Petrova economic study, and the Ernst & Young macroeconomic study. What they were able to find doing these empirical studies in 2015, and these studies are getting updated as we speak, they found that really, out of all of the 1031s that are done, about 88% of them actually end in a taxable event. So it's really a misnomer to think that you never pay the tax, because people do cash out, and that's when they're able to get the money that they need. What we like to try to let people know is this is simply like a 401k of real estate. When legislators understand that, they're like, "Well, wait a second, that kind of makes sense. You're able to grow your real estate just like you're growing your 401k tax-free, and then when you cash out, that's when you pay the tax." It's like, yep. So that seems like it's been a big positive to explain that to people.
Why do you think?
Oh, good.
Why do you think the analysis that was done in February did not take into consideration those studies that you just mentioned that have a lot of good information on exchanges?
Lauren, it's just unfortunate. I think politics is the cause for a lot of stuff. And I think since President Trump, this is his bailiwick of commercial real estate, I think that the idea that they were going to be able to eliminate the 1031 to pay for, they say, $750 billion over 10 years for childcare and for healthcare for seniors. I think if you pit one thing against the other, commercial real estate versus helping people, Trump's in commercial real estate versus helping people. I think it's a political thing that they're trying to do. And, I'm not trying to judge Democrats, Republicans. I'm just trying to educate. And I want to educate as many of the Democrat members of Congress and the Senate to let them know why this is a bad thing. Because as we all know, and you and people on that are watching this have seen how the 1031 drastically has improved their lives and their families' lives as well as their heirs. And it's the energizer of our economy. The studies show that if you did not have 1031, property would just stop being sold because people would want to try to not have to pay the tax as long as possible. So as we know, buyers renovate and owners maintain, right?
That's a really good point. It's it really helps the market continue to move basically and reposition and cause people to spend money. Where if they didn't, the sellers would just maintain and really not make any changes.
Well, and the studies also show that for every 1031 that's done, roughly 30 jobs are created, and those jobs create tax, an income tax. So the realtor gets a commission. You have the title company, you have the lawyers, you have all the different transactions along the way, plus the trades, the jobs, the union jobs, the people that are replacing the LED, put in LED lights. I mean, all of those different aspects are all cascading through the economy, and people are paying their income tax. And then the other thing is that government gets taxed. The government gets money for transfer taxes for local and state government. And that's a really big deal. And the other thing, which is interesting with how our property tax system works, when your assessor is able to identify how much a property is worth, they take the latest sale usually. And if something sits there for a long time, they're not going to be able to have the most updated data. So by having properties exchange and to sell and to change hands, you're able to continually upgrade that property, and you're able to increase the value so that the local school districts and everybody else are able to get their fair share as well. So that's something that they don't necessarily think of, because when it's just natural. You guys know how many taxes are taken out of when you do without an exchange. What are the taxes? Out of $1 million, how much do you take out?
God, we're in California, or at least I'm in California. So when you factor in California, it could be 35 to somewhat times upward of 40% when you factor in all the different taxes that could be withdrawn. That's a huge number.
So right. So if you get to defer that, what the study showed is that basically the people use that money to buy a bigger piece of property, or they use that money to be able to have the money to renovate. And so they're able to make the property more valuable. And you have areas that have some of these dark shopping centers, or they have an older apartment complex. The reason why they get upgraded is because of 1031 exchanges. People are able to have the money to be able to make it nicer for their community. No one likes driving past a dilapidated building in their community. And if you had the 1031 exchanges stopped, that will be one of the results. Ending results is this happening, which is absolutely horrible.
It absolutely is. It's interesting when I've talked to various congressional people over the years, and a lot of times it might be their staffers. The staffers tend to be pretty young. And what I found is they think that if you just, erase Section 1031 from the tax code, look at all this tax revenue you're going to collect. But what we found over the years when we talk to investors, depending on the levels of your tax rates, 60 upward to 80% of investors say, well, if I couldn't defer the tax, I just wouldn't sell. Right. And then when you explain to these staffers, well, that means you've got two transactions that disappear. You've got two title companies, two escrow companies, two realtors, two appraisers, two lenders, et cetera, that do not get their income, and they don't pay taxes. So it's actually a revenue loser.
Well, and you mentioned that the 22-year-olds, it is absolutely the truth that people who are working on the Hill are very young. And it's a great place to learn and get experience. And it's really like drinking from the fire hose, because you have so many different issues that are coming at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour. So I remember the last go around in 2017, I walked into an office and I said, I'm here to talk about the 1031. And the staff person said, 1031? No, it's 11 o'clock. So they don't know they don't know what the thing is. And you have to sit and explain it to them. And then after a while, they get it. And it really shows that one of the most important things we need to consistently do is educate people, because there's going to be a turnover of young people all the time in these offices, and there's a turnover in Washington every 2 years as well. So we have to educate, and that's a big deal. But the 1031 bill, and Lauren, one of the reasons why it's been in the tax code for so long, I think, is because it also has some interesting people that are for it that you wouldn't necessarily realize. And besides the commercial real estate world, conservation people are for the 1031 exchange. And you're like, why is that? Well, farmers use the 1031 exchange all the time. Really, farmers are cash poor and dirt rich. And so when farmers have their land next to streams, rivers, they have conservation groups that are coming to them to want to buy some of their land to make buffer zones between the different waterways and estuaries and so forth, so that the runoff from their farms can go through the natural plantings that act as natural filters, pollutants. And that's a big deal, because a conservation group, if a farmer wouldn't be able to sell because they wouldn't have the money to pay the capital gains taxes. And so this is a really big deal in the conservation world. And I know that, one time, I think 20 some years ago, when they were trying to take out the 1031, I believe the conservation movement was able to really rise up and helped to overcome it then. So now we're all working together with the farm groups and with the conservation groups. It is amazing to me. We're working, with so many different organizations, but as you guys are qualified intermediaries, there's no better organization than the Federation of Exchange Accommodators. I call them the Jedi Council of the 1031 exchange. I mean, they're so knowing of the 1031. And the other thing I highlight is that it's kind of like, with everybody else, it's kind of like a bacon and an egg breakfast. You have the chicken, is concerned about the 1031, but the pig is committed because you got to make sure that it's okay. So, but the qualified intermediaries, you guys, I mean, you're on the front line. How people are impacted by this, and people who are ready to retire, how a 1031 helps them get into passive investments. I mean, I'm sure you have lots of experiences with this.
Very true. So if they're the Jedi Knights, who would be Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Well, I think John Wonderlick would be the Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Dave Fernandez would be Yoda. So.
Now, you mentioned farmers being a group that does a lot of 1031 exchanges. We know, of course, that most individuals that do exchanges are not that huge commercial companies that people correlate with exchanges. Can you comment on that? On who you really see doing these exchanges, who's really benefiting, and what degree are they benefiting from the exchange?
Well, that's a really good point, Lauren. The National Association of Realtors did a study, with all their different realtors, and they highlight that a lot of these exchanges are done with average, everyday people. The people that have cobbled together their money, they've been able to start off with one small little rental home, and then they're able to go into a bigger home, and they slowly, like a 401k, they slowly build their wealth and build what they do. And it's great when they're able then to cash out and get into possibly a passive investment through a 1031 DST. But farmers, it's been very intriguing, because farmers are able to know where they're going to be in the way of development. And so they'll be able to sell their property to a developer, and then they can go to the next farm, and they can buy the next farm and be able to grow their wealth and build. And these are just regular American families that have been on land for 100 plus years. And that the 1031 is literally one of the best ways they can cash out if their kids don't want to farm anymore, they don't know what to do with their land, they can absolutely get into a passive like Delaware Statutory Trust, and they can 1031 into that. And it's been a wonderful way for people to be able to pass on their wealth from generation to generation. So it's a real positive.
You know, I thought about a conversation I had last week with somebody who called in, and which is a perfect example coming off of what you just said. And this family was a military family, and they had acquired a single-family home where they had been deployed here in California, bought the home, and then within 2 years they were shifted to a different port. And it was just not the right time to sell, so they kind of got essentially stuck with this single-family house, and they decided to rent it out. And 5 years later, they decided they kind of liked the rental property business, and they were ready for more. So their whole concept was to sell that and maybe buy like a fourplex, until they talked to their accountant and got the surprise of what that capital gain was going to cost them. And then, of course, they went through the whole 1031 exchange conversation. So from their perspective, without the 1031, they wouldn't have been able to afford the mortgage and acquire the fourplex. So that's kind of a perfect bread and butter story of how the 1031 helps the average everyday American. It's not for the wealthy per se. Most of the people doing exchanges are just the average Joe Blows and Jane Smiths.
Well, I'll tell you, I work for the Inland Real Estate Group of companies. It was founded by 4 Chicago public school teachers, and we're 53 years old now. But one of the things that 1031 is a big part of our history, because these teachers, they left teaching and they ended up getting, they're doing so well by getting other teachers and principals and family members to give them money. And they were able to get to up to 42,000 apartments in Chicago. And they did that through limited partnerships. Well, in the 80s, the tax law has changed, and some of these limited partnerships were underwater. Well, these 4 teachers wouldn't allow their fellow teachers and friends and family to go bankrupt. So they put all their money back into the company. They went to Walmart. They said, hey, can we do sale leasebacks with you? Walmart said, sure, and which was terrific. And then they went to Treasury, and they said, there's this thing called the 1031 exchange. Can we 1031 exchange these people in these underwater limited partnerships into a fractional share interest of a Walmart? And Treasury's like, well, nobody's really done that before. So sure, go ahead. And it was like, it's a wonderful life. It blew people's minds. I mean, so these average, people, principals, retired teachers, they were able to go into these Walmarts and not lose any of their principal and still make money on this. And that's really what inspired our company, the Inland Group, to help create the Delaware Statutory Trust 1031 like-kind exchange. And so when people are tired of the toilets, trash, and tenants, they can get out of that and get into a fractional share interest of a big apartment complex, whatever it is, through a 1031. So that's an average person who have been able to benefit. And it's really a remarkable story. You want to have growth in the economy. You want to have people to be able to have something for their family when they retire. This is really the 401k of real estate. It's really the way that people are able to do it. And we're just so proud of working with so many organizations. I got to tell you, we are part of about 16 different real estate organizations that are fighting for the 1031 and advocating for it. One of them, you talked about the realtors. My realtor pen is a thing I wear proudly. There's 1.4 million realtors. And when the 1031 exchange was being looked at, being challenged last time, there were over 10,000 realtors walking Capitol Hill to tell everybody why the 1031 is so important. And these realtors are all part of everybody's community, and this is their business, and they understand what impacts their community. And these people are all on commission. They eat what they kill, so to speak. So they are very much always highly attuned of what's going on. You have the Real Estate Roundtable, which has all the different national real estate organizations, the National Association of Real Estate Investment Trusts. You have all the different other groups like the Institute for Portfolio Alternatives, the ADISA, the CCIMs, IRMs, SIORs. There's so many different acronyms, but the Mortgage Bankers Association, the Council of Real Estate Finance, so many different organizations know that the 1031 is vitally important. And we are working already. We don't know what's going to happen in the election, but we are already going to different Zoom meetings with members of the Democrats and Republicans. We're talking to our federal elected officials to go through all this data. And we're trying to make sure nip it in the bud, really, to let them know that this is something that has to stay in the tax code. One of the things that they highlight to me is they say, well, Dan, we need money for what Vice President Biden wants to do. And he wants to have free health care, and he wants to have free child care. And don't you think the 1031 is a good way to pay for it? And I say, well, I'm not privy to all the different things the government can do, but I can tell you one thing: the thing that's been in the tax code for now it's going to be 100 years next year. You don't want to mess with that, especially now that we have COVID attacking the commercial real estate world. You don't want to destroy that when, especially, we've just spent trillions of dollars to shore up our economy. It's like you're gonna do this. So we're really educating folks, and it's interesting because a variety of congressmen, they don't realize how important the 1031 is. We were talking to a gentleman from Napa Valley area, and he didn't realize that last year alone there were $6 billion worth of 1031s in his district, and the kind of economic stimulus that was to his area blew his mind. It's like, oh my gosh! And if you just all of a sudden just stop that overnight, that would be devastating to the economy there. You go into rural. We're talking to a rural Alabama congresswoman, and again, the 1031 is super important for that, and also opportunity zones also are a big thing as well. And you just don't know what they're going to be doing in the future. But the one thing we can look at is the past, and the past has shown and has empirically been tested with these different studies, Link Petrova and Ernst Young. Those studies have been very, very tried and true.
And I think the Ernst & Young, as I recall, said, and this was back in the 08 to 12 recession, that if they were to eliminate 1031 exchanges, GDP would drop by, I think it said 0.8%. Yeah. And at the time, GDP was about 1.9%. So that just shows you that is a huge impact on the GDP.
Absolutely. That's a really good point, Bill. And we have to, again, just keep ringing the bell. The 1031 is important to not only the real estate professionals. It's important to the agriculture world, the conservation world, and it's important to everybody in the community, because you want to have a solid place to live. And this is a tool that everybody utilizes, and you just can't take it for granted. It's pretty dynamic, and it cuts across party lines so much so. The president, I know this is his industry, but it really cuts across party lines. There's lots of Democrats that have done 1031s too. So we're ringing the bell. We're educating people. And I think one of the best websites people can go to is that the Federation of Exchange Accommodators. What do they have? 1031.com. Mm-hmm. And you can see the advocacy page where you can type in your name into this database, and it'll automatically populate with your congressman and your 2 senators, and it'll send them an email if you want to explain why it's so important to you. But the different Ernst & Young studies, the white papers, I mean, there's lots of stuff to read about if you'd like to know more. But for the average person who's out there every day in the trenches, especially the realtors, they know that this is a big deal. And CPAs, tax lawyers, we're working with all of them. And they're just shocked that this is even coming up. And so, we're going to be, ringing this bell, and hopefully after November 3rd, we'll take this will be taken off the table.
Well, they can certainly go to the website then, Federation of Exchange Accommodators. Anything else they could do to help fight the fight, to get the word out, to educate people?
Well, I'd like to ask for a show of hands if we were in person, but I always ask how many people know their congressman or congresswoman. And it's amazing how many people have no idea who their congressman or congresswoman is. And it's super important that you build a relationship with them and you get to know who the staff people are. And if those staff people are able to put a face to an issue, that's real helpful. So the best thing that people can do if you want to save the 1031 is to get to know your elected official and their staff, go into their office and start just talking to them about your life experiences. Because what normally happens is that you and Bill, you and Lauren end up being more than just a qualified intermediary. You end up becoming kind of a psychologist. I mean, you talk to people about their most important assets in their lives. They talk about their kids, their family. You guys know the human aspect of this business, and all of the people who are listening know the human aspect of it. And if you're able to share some of those personal life, real stories, then I think we're on high ground. I don't think there's a chance that people are going to want to get rid of it once they find out these good stories of, some senior citizens that were able to retire, or people that were able to reposition a building in their community that was falling apart, that was able to create more jobs and help more people. So many different aspects to this stuff. And anytime people can relate their personal experiences, I think is the best. So we just appreciate you guys taking the time to highlight this to all the people out there listening, that we can get this to be get the education going and really get it saved.
And I've heard people make comments too about, well, my vote doesn't count, or if I send a letter to my congressman, it's not going to make any difference. And what would you tell them, and how would you respond to that?
Well, let me tell you, I know lots of different people that have won by just a few votes. And when you remember the hanging Chad in Florida, and
Yeah.
That's a really big deal. Yeah, it's a misnomer. Every vote does count. And in my experience, doing the emailing is good. The best, if you want the best is to create a personal relationship. And if you can go into their office and talk to them, that is phenomenal. You can call them on the phone, any type of personal discussion, that's the best. And it really does make a difference, because there are some elected officials that put their finger in the wind to say, what are people doing? And if no one is saying anything good about the 1031, well, then they'd say, well, yeah, let's get rid of it. Nobody cares. We got to show we care. If it's not us, who? I mean, that's the best question. If it's not for us, who's going to do it? We all have to do it. And then to show that this does benefit people, because if we don't, nobody else will. And I think it's important that we do. And it's that important to all of us that it's a bigger thing for our ultimate economy, and really for the preservation of the way of our life.
Absolutely. And I had to laugh there when you mentioned the chat. I literally was yesterday in the office here, and one of our younger folks kind of had that look on her face. Finally, she said, "What's a chat?" So I'd explain the whole voting process.
This voting season is going to be really interesting with COVID and the mail-in ballots, and how that it's going to be. All the different experts that I know in Washington, they don't think we're going to know who's going to be in charge of the Senate or who's going to be president on election night. They think it's going to take a while. So we shall see what happens. But again, we're not advocating for either party. We're advocating for the 1031 exchange. And we want to just educate as many people as we can of how it's important. And, common sense and logic usually wins through. And that's what we all have to do.
Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, my friend. I'm so glad you're able to join us. And as always, you're a wealth of knowledge.
Well, I got to tell you, Bill and Lauren, you guys are a cut above. And I am honored to be your friend, and I have the utmost respect in what both of you do, and just the stellar, incredible company that you guys have created over these years. It's an honor to know you and to work with you.
Thank you so much. Much appreciated. And likewise, look forward to lots of future webinar seminars together.
Sounds good. That sounds great. God bless you guys.
You too.
Thanks,
Take
Dan.
care.
Stay healthy and safe.
You too. Take care. Bye. Well, thank you for joining us. And today, if you could, make sure you share this podcast with everybody you can possibly share it with. We got to get the message out there. So the most important thing is share this on your social media to help other folks understand what we're missing if we lose the 1031 exchange. So share it like crazy. And Laura, did you have anybody email you with any questions for our Go Ahead Ask mailbag segment of the podcast today?
I did. George from Pocatello, Idaho, said he did an exchange earlier this year, sold the relinquished property held in an S corporation, The lender would not finance the replacement if it was held in the S Corp. So he was advised to acquire the replacement property in his personal name and then contribute the property into the S Corporation later. His qualified intermediary agreed with that move, and now his CPA is saying that it does not qualify. Can you comment on that?
Ooh, I bet that was a surprise. Yeah, that's I'm kind of speechless because the qualified intermediary should have known better. There's actually a case out of, I think, Colorado, where the individual sold as an S corp and then bought as individuals, or actually, I guess it's the other way around. But same thing. They were audited. It was disqualified, and they went to court and lost because. And in this case, they sold as an S corp, and that second replacement property, it sounds like they bought as a individual. Well, that's a different taxpayer. I'm sure that he's probably the only shareholder in the S corp, or maybe his family's the only owners of the S corp, so they think it's okay. But the S corp is a corporation. That's a completely different tax-paying entity. So selling as an S corp, buying as an individual, two different taxpayers, that's not going to qualify. So that was probably a painful experience. Ouch. Well, hopefully keep emailing your questions in. We'll respond to everything on the next podcast. Thank you for joining us and listening to Go Ahead Ask today. We really appreciate that. And we will continue with the Unraveling the Mystery of 1031 Exchanges, Part 2. So the next podcast will be Part 2 of the original that we started last time. So tune in for that in 2 weeks. And thank you again. We look forward to talking to you and working with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Go Ahead Ask with the Exeter Group. Join us for our next episode when we further unravel the mysteries of real estate.